The crowd at the Sweetwater Junction depot had thinned to nothing as the afternoon sun blazed across the Wyoming Territory. Olivia Montgomery stood alone on the wooden platform, her gloved hands clasped tightly around the handle of her worn leather satchel. The train that had deposited her here 3 hours ago was now a distant memory, along with the family who had promised to receive her. Dust devils swirled across the empty street as the realization settled over her like a shroud they weren't coming. It was 1878, and at 22 years old, Olivia had traveled over 1,000 miles from Boston to the Wyoming Territory based on a letter from distant cousins offering her a home following her parents' deaths. The invitation had seemed like providence after the bank seized their home and belongings. Now, as the station agent locked the depot door behind him with a sympathetic but unhelpful shrug, she felt utterly abandoned. "Closing up, miss," he'd said. "Family still not here, town's just down the way." "Hotel's decent enough if you can afford it." She couldn't. The remaining coins in her reticule would hardly cover a meal, let alone lodging. Olivia blinked back tears and straightened her spine. She would not break down here, not where anyone passing by might witness her distress. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A tall figure on horseback appeared from the direction of the main street, riding with the easy confidence of someone at home in the saddle. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out a weather-worn Stetson and broad shoulders beneath a dusty leather vest. The man reined his horse to a stop before the platform. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could see a strong jaw dusted with stubble and eyes that assessed her with clear interest. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Been waiting long?" "Since the noon train," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He glanced at the empty platform, then back to her solitary figure. "Appears whoever you're waiting on isn't coming." "It would seem so," she said, fighting to maintain her composure. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Thomas Garrett," he introduced himself, stepping onto the platform. "Most folks call me Tucker. I run the Double G ranch north of town." "Olivia Montgomery." She offered a small curtsy, then immediately felt foolish. This wasn't Boston. Tucker Garrett's eyes softened as he took in her city clothes and exhausted posture. "Miss Montgomery, I don't mean to pry, but it looks like you've been left at the depot without a word." The simple truth of his statement broke something loose inside her. A single tear escaped despite her best efforts. "The Stillwells," she managed. "They're my cousins. They wrote offering me a place after my parents passed. I sent word of my arrival date, but—" She gestured at the empty platform. Tucker's expression darkened. "The Stillwells left the territory 3 weeks ago, sold their place and headed to California." Olivia felt as if she might collapse. "They left without telling me, but the letter." "Folks out here sometimes move on quick," Tucker said, though his tone suggested he found the behavior inexcusable. "Miss Montgomery, night's coming and you can't stay here." "I haven't the funds for accommodations," she admitted. The last of her pride crumbled with the confession. Tucker Garrett studied her for a long moment. "My sister Martha manages my household. She's been pestering me to find her help with the place. It's honest work if you're willing." I've never been in service," Olivia stammered. "Not service, Miss Montgomery, employment. Room, board, and wages in exchange for helping run a busy ranch house." He paused. "Unless you've got better prospects waiting." They both knew she didn't. Still, the offer seemed too convenient, too perfect. "Why would you help me, Mr. Garrett? You don't know anything about me." Tucker's lips curved into a slight smile that transformed his weathered face. "Strange as it might sound, Miss Montgomery, I think you've been waiting for me all along." The boldness of his statement startled her. "I beg your pardon. I needed someone trustworthy to help Martha." "Martha prayed for it, and here you are like an answer." He extended his hand. "Sometimes the good Lord works in peculiar ways." Olivia hesitated, weighing her options, which were painfully few. This man's eyes held no malice, only a straightforward offer of assistance. With a deep breath, she placed her gloved hand in his. "I accept your offer, Mr. Garrett." "Tucker," he corrected, retrieving her trunk from beside the platform. "We don't stand much on formality at the Double G." He secured her belongings to his horse with practiced efficiency. "Can your horse carry us both?" she asked, eyeing the animal uncertainly. "Maverick here's carried heavier loads through worse conditions." Tucker said, patting the horse's neck. "He won't mind the company." Before she could protest, Tucker had lifted her onto the saddle with ease that spoke of considerable strength. He mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance while still providing the support she needed to stay seated. "Hold tight to the pommel," he instructed. "It's about an hour's ride." As they left Sweetwater Junction behind, Olivia's mind raced with questions and fears. She had entrusted her fate to a stranger, something she never would have imagined doing mere hours ago. Yet what choice did she have? The Wyoming landscape stretched before them, vast and intimidating. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already gathering evening shadows. The open range looked nothing like the manicured parks and crowded streets of Boston. "It takes some getting used to," Tucker said, as if reading her thoughts. "All this open space." "It's beautiful," she admitted. "And terrifying." "Like most worthwhile things," he replied. They rode in silence for a while before Olivia gathered her courage. "Tell me about your sister and your ranch." Tucker's voice took on a warmer tone. "Martha's 10 years my senior, raised me after our parents died. She's got strong opinions about everything and makes the best biscuits this side of the Mississippi. And the ranch? Double G-Tech's been in the Garrett family for 15 years. My father started with 20 acres and a dream. We're up to 1,200 acres now, 200 head of cattle, and a respectable horse breeding operation. 8 ranch hands, all good men. That sounds substantial," Tucker chuckled. "We do all right, not the biggest spread, but it's ours free and clear." As they crested a rise, Olivia gasped. Below them lay a green valley carved by a winding river. Nestled against the foothills sat a collection of buildings anchored by a large 2-story house built of sturdy logs and stone. Smoke curled from the chimney, and even from this distance she could see figures moving about the yard. "Welcome to the Double G," Tucker said, a note of pride in his voice. The homestead grew larger as they approached. Olivia noted the careful planning of the layout: barn and corrals positioned to block north winds from the house, outbuildings arranged for efficiency, a kitchen garden fence to keep out wildlife. This was no haphazard settlement, but a thoughtfully constructed home. A tall woman emerged from the house as they rode into the yard. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but her face lit with curiosity as she spotted Olivia. "Tucker Garrett, what have you brought home now?" she called, wiping her hands on her apron. Tucker dismounted first, then reached up to help Olivia down. "Martha, this is Miss Olivia Montgomery. She's come from Boston to help you with the house." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Is that so, and when did we decide this?" "About an hour ago at the train depot," Tucker replied evenly. "The Stillwells invited her out, then left for California without telling her." Martha's expression softened immediately. "Those worthless," she caught herself. "Forgive my language, Miss Montgomery. The Stillwells never were reliable folk." She approached, extending her hand. "You must be exhausted. Come inside before you fall over." Olivia took the offered hand gratefully. "Thank you, Miss Garrett. Never married," Martha corrected without rancor. "But you'll call me Martha, everyone does." Tucker untied Olivia's trunk. "I'll bring this to the spare room." "See that you do," Martha said, already guiding Olivia toward the house. "And tell Pedro to heat extra water. The poor girl needs a proper wash after that train journey." Olivia allowed herself to be led into the house, too tired to object to being discussed as if she weren't present. The interior was surprisingly refined: polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. Colorful quilts and hand-woven rugs added warmth to the space. "It's lovely," she said honestly. Martha seemed pleased. "We believe in comfort. No need to live like savages just because we're in the territories." She directed Olivia to a chair at the kitchen table. "Sit, you need food." Within minutes, Martha had produced a bowl of stew, fresh bread, and a cup of strong coffee. Olivia ate gratefully, the first real meal she'd had in days. "Now," Martha said, sitting across from her, "tell me your story, all of it." Between bites, Olivia explained her circumstances: her father's failed investments, his sudden death from heart failure, her mother's decline and passing 6 months later, the bank's seizure of their home, and the letter from the Stillwells that had seemed like salvation. Martha listened without interruption, her sharp eyes assessing. When Olivia finished, she nodded decisively. "Well, their loss is our gain. I've needed help for ages, but finding someone suitable out here is nearly impossible. Can you read?" Yes, of course. Right cipher. I attended Miss Pembroke's Academy for Young Ladies until I was 18. Martha looked impressed. Education is something I value greatly. Tucker and I both read every night. Now, about your duties. Tucker entered the kitchen, interrupting the interview. Your trunk's upstairs, Miss Montgomery. Pedro's bringing hot water for a bath. Thank you, Olivia said, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look. Martha stood. We can discuss details tomorrow. You need rest. Come, I'll show you to your room. The upstairs of the house was as well appointed as the main floor. Martha led her to a room at the end of the hallway. This will be yours, she said, opening the door. Olivia stepped inside, eyes widening. The room was spacious, with a comfortable-looking bed, a bureau, a small writing desk by the window, and a rocking chair in the corner. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed. It's too fine, she protested. If I'm to be a servant employee, Martha corrected firmly. And at the Double G, we believe in treating people properly. There's a washroom across the hall. I'll send up hot water. After Martha left, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She'd arrived with nothing but fading hope and found, what exactly? Employment certainly, but something in Tucker Garrett's steady gaze and his sister's brisk kindness suggested the possibility of more. Later, clean and dressed in a fresh nightgown, Olivia stood at the window of her new room. Below, lanterns illuminated the yard where Tucker was checking the livestock one final time before retiring. He moved with purpose and confidence, a man at home in his domain. Thank you, she whispered to the night, uncertain if she was addressing Tucker, Martha, or a god she'd begun to doubt after her parents' deaths. As if sensing her gaze, Tucker looked up toward her window. She stepped back, embarrassed to be caught watching. But before she moved away entirely, she saw him tip his hat in a small gesture that felt like a promise. Sleep came quickly that night, deeper and more peaceful than any she'd known since leaving Boston. The rooster's crow jolted Olivia awake the next morning. Disoriented, she blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling before remembering where she was. Sunlight streamed through the window, suggesting she'd slept later than intended. She hurried to dress in one of her simpler day dresses, pinning her hair into a practical knot. Downstairs, she found Martha kneading dough at the kitchen table. Good morning, Olivia said hesitantly. I apologize for sleeping so late. Martha glanced up. Nonsense, you needed the rest. Coffee's hot, help yourself. She nodded toward the stove. Tucker's already been out for hours. Men took breakfast at dawn. Olivia poured a cup of coffee, then stood awkwardly, unsure of her role. How may I assist you? Martha assessed her city dress with a critical eye. First, we need to find you more practical clothing. Those fine things won't last a week of ranch work. She dusted flour from her hands. For today, you can help me with bread and preserves. Tomorrow, we'll ride into town for supplies and proper attire. The day passed in a blur of activity. Martha proved to be a patient teacher, explaining the routines of the ranch house as they worked. By evening, Olivia's back ached from unfamiliar labor, but she felt a satisfaction she'd never experienced in Boston society. She was setting the table for supper when Tucker entered, bringing the scents of leather, horses, and open air with him. He'd cleaned up, his face freshly washed, hair still damp at the temples. Miss Montgomery, he greeted her with a nod. How was your first day? Educational, she replied, offering a small smile. And please call me Olivia. A pleased expression crossed his face. Olivia, then. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, until Martha's arrival with a steaming pot broke the connection. Sit, both of you, Martha commanded. Pedro brought fresh trout from the creek. Dinner was a revelation to Olivia. In Boston, meals had been formal affairs governed by strict etiquette. Here, conversation flowed freely. Tucker and Martha discussed ranch operations, local news, and books they'd recently read, including her in their discussions as if she'd always been part of their lives. Olivia attended a fine school in Boston, Martha informed her brother. Her handwriting is excellent. I'm thinking she could help with the accounts. Tucker nodded thoughtfully. That would be helpful. Ranch is growing faster than our record keeping. I'd be happy to assist, Olivia offered. My father taught me bookkeeping. Your father was in business? Tucker asked. Olivia's smile faltered, banking, though not very successfully toward the end. Tucker seemed to sense her discomfort. Banking's loss is ranching's gain then. His kindness warmed her. This man had a gift for saying exactly what she needed to hear. After dinner, Tucker surprised her by producing a worn volume of Tennyson's poems. "Martha mentioned you enjoy reading, thought you might like this." Olivia accepted the book, touched by the thoughtful gesture. "Thank you. It's one of my favorites." "Mine too," he said, and the simple admission of shared interest felt significant somehow. The following days fell into a rhythm. Mornings were devoted to household chores alongside Martha. Afternoons often found Olivia organizing the ranch's haphazard accounts into proper ledgers. The work was satisfying, giving her a sense of contribution she'd never felt before. True to her word, Martha took Olivia to town for suitable clothing: sturdy cotton dresses, a riding skirt, practical boots, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect her fair skin from the Wyoming sun. Olivia carefully stored her Boston dresses in the cedar chest under her bed, uncertain if she'd ever have occasion to wear them again. Tucker remained a puzzle. He was unfailingly polite but maintained a certain distance, as if unsure how to interact with her beyond their employer-employee relationship. Occasionally, she caught him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, but he would quickly look away. 2 weeks after her arrival, Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard raised voices from the corral. Shading her eyes, she saw Tucker attempting to calm a magnificent black stallion that reared and bucked against the restraining ropes. "Easy, Diablo," Tucker was saying in a low, steady voice. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The horse's eyes rolled white with fear as it lunged, nearly catching Tucker with its hooves. Olivia gasped, drawing the animal's attention. It stilled for a moment, ears pricked toward her. Tucker glanced her way. "Stay back, Olivia, he's not broken yet." But something in the horse's posture made Olivia take a step forward instead. "He's frightened, not mean." "Doesn't matter much when those hooves connect," Tucker warned, though he didn't order her away again. Slowly, Olivia approached the fence. "What happened to him?" "Found him trapped in barbed wire 3 days ago," Tucker explained, never taking his eyes off the nervous animal. "Previous owner used a heavy hand, horse hasn't forgotten." Olivia studied the stallion's heaving sides and trembling legs. "My grandfather raised thoroughbreds in Virginia. I spent summers there as a child." "This isn't a thoroughbred and he's not in Virginia," Tucker said, but his tone held more concern than dismissal. "May I try something?" she asked. Tucker hesitated, then nodded. "Stay behind the fence for now." Olivia removed her apron and hung it carefully on the fence post. Then she began to hum a gentle, flowing melody her grandfather had used to soothe nervous horses. The stallion's ears flicked toward the sound. She continued humming, keeping her movements slow and deliberate as she reached into her pocket for the apple she'd been saving for her afternoon break. "He can smell that," Tucker said quietly. "Might help." Olivia held the apple on her flattened palm, extending her arm over the fence. The stallion snorted, torn between fear and temptation. "It's all right," she murmured between verses of her song. "No one will hurt you here." Minutes stretched as the horse regarded her warily. Finally, with a soft whicker, he took one step forward, then another, until his velvety muzzle stretched toward her offering. With delicate precision, he lifted the apple from her palm and retreated to chew it. Tucker's expression was a mixture of surprise and admiration. "I've been trying to get close to him for 3 days. He just needed to know you weren't going to hurt him," Olivia said simply. Something shifted in Tucker's gaze. "Some hurts run deep, take more than an apple to heal." She had the distinct feeling they weren't just talking about the horse anymore. "Most wounded creatures just need patience and kindness," she said, "and to know they're safe." Tucker nodded slowly. "Wise words, Miss Montgomery." After that day, Tucker began including Olivia in the gentling of Diablo. Each evening, she would accompany him to the corral with an apple or carrot, singing softly as Tucker gradually accustomed the stallion to human touch. It became a ritual they both looked forward to, a pocket of time that belonged just to them. Their conversations during these sessions moved beyond ranch matters. Tucker spoke of his father's dreams for the Double G, his own ambitions to expand the horse breeding program, and the challenges of building something lasting in a territory still finding its identity. In turn, Olivia shared stories of Boston, her education, and eventually the painful details of her parents' deaths and the financial ruin that followed. "I never imagined ending up here," she admitted one evening as they watched Diablo trot around the corral, now wearing a halter without protest. Wyoming wasn't even a place I could picture. Do you regret it? Tucker asked, his face half-shadowed in the fading light. Olivia considered the question honestly. I regret the circumstances that forced me here, but being here, she shook her head. No, I don't regret that at all. His smile was worth the admission. As May turned to June, the ranch bustled with activity. The cattle drive to summer pastures occupied the men for several days, leaving the women to manage the homestead. Olivia embraced her expanding responsibilities, learning to make cheese from Martha, assisting with the kitchen garden, and continuing to improve the ranch's bookkeeping system. She also began riding lessons, with Tucker as her instructor. Her first attempts on the gentle mare he'd selected were ungraceful, but she persevered, determined to master this essential ranch skill. You're a natural, Tucker encouraged after she successfully completed her first solo ride around the corral. A natural disaster, perhaps, she laughed, brushing dust from her riding skirt, but I'm improving. You're too hard on yourself, he said, helping her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Thank you for teaching me, she said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Tucker cleared his throat and stepped back. My pleasure. He busied himself with checking the mare's tack. When you're ready, I'll show you the North Ridge, best view on the whole ranch. The promised ride came a week later, on a clear Sunday afternoon. Tucker had been distant in the days following their moment in the corral, as if regretting the brief intimacy they'd shared. Olivia had worried he might withdraw completely, but instead he appeared at the house after church, 2 saddled horses in tow. Still want to see that view? He asked, his expression carefully neutral. Olivia's heart lifted. Yes, please. Martha, watching from the porch, made a poor attempt to hide her smile. Take a canteen. It's warm today. They rode at an easy pace, Tucker adjusting to Olivia's still developing riding skills. He pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the ranch's early days, gradually relaxing into the companionship they'd established during Diablo's training sessions. The trail to the ridge grew steeper, winding through stands of pine and aspen. Olivia concentrated on following Tucker's instructions, leaning forward in the saddle as they climbed, keeping a steady pressure on the reins. When they finally emerged onto the ridge, the vista took her breath away. The double G spread below them in a patchwork of green pastures and golden fields. The river curved like a silver ribbon through the heart of the property, and in the distance, mountains stretched in a jagged line against the impossibly blue sky. It's magnificent, she whispered, dismounting to better appreciate the panorama. Tucker tied their horses to a nearby tree and joined her at the edge of the ridge. My father brought me here when I was 12, told me everything I could see would be my responsibility someday. He shook his head, scared me half to death, and now I understand what he meant. It wasn't about ownership, it was about stewardship, taking care of something bigger than yourself. Olivia nodded, watching an eagle soar on the thermal currents rising from the valley. I think I'm beginning to understand that too. They stood in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching. When Tucker finally spoke again, his voice had a new quality to it, hesitant, almost vulnerable. Olivia, there's something I need to tell you. She turned to face him, noting the unusual seriousness in his expression. What is it? He took a deep breath. The day I found you at the depot wasn't a coincidence. Confusion furrowed her brow. I don't understand. I knew you were coming, he admitted. The station agent mentioned a young woman arriving from Boston to stay with the Stillwells. When I told him they'd left weeks ago, he was concerned about what would happen to you. Olivia took a step back. You knew, before you came to the depot, Tucker nodded, looking uncomfortable. I went there planning to offer you transportation to town, maybe help you find alternative arrangements. I didn't expect. He gestured vaguely. You didn't expect what, Mr. Garrett? Her voice had cooled considerably. I didn't expect you, he said simply. Who you are, how you'd fit at the double G like you were always meant to be there. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, trying to process this revelation. So when you said I'd been waiting for you all along, I meant it, he interrupted. Just not in the way you might have thought. I wasn't being completely honest about how I came to be there, and I'm sorry for that. She turned back to the view, needing space to think. The initial sting of deception faded as she considered his actions rather than his words. He'd offered her respectable employment when she had nowhere else to turn. He and Martha had welcomed her into their home, treated her with dignity and kindness. "Why tell me now?" she finally asked. Tucker moved to stand beside her again, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Because I find myself thinking of you as more than just Martha's assistant or the ranch bookkeeper, and I can't explore those feelings honestly if there's a lie between us, even one of omission." Her heart beat faster at his admission. "Feelings?" His eyes met hers directly. "Yes, Olivia. Feelings that go well beyond employer and employee. But I understand if you can't return them, especially now." Olivia studied his face, the earnest blue eyes, the worry lines creasing his brow, the tension in his jaw as he awaited her response. In Boston, she'd received declarations from suitors who spoke flowery words while calculating her father's wealth. Tucker's straightforward admission, coupled with his integrity in revealing the truth, moved her deeply. "I believe," she said carefully, "that sometimes our paths cross exactly when and where they're meant to, regardless of how we find ourselves at that crossroads." Hope flickered in his expression. "Does that mean you forgive me?" "There's little to forgive, Tucker. You helped a stranger in need. Your methods may have been somewhat unconventional, but your intentions were honorable." Relief washed over his features. "And my feelings? Have I ruined any chance?" "No," she interrupted softly. "You haven't ruined anything." His smile transformed his entire face, erasing years of worry. With deliberate slowness, he reached for her hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he laced their fingers together, the calluses on his palm rough against her softer skin. They stood hand in hand, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. The moment felt significant, a turning point neither had anticipated when the day began. The ride back to the ranch was different, charged with new awareness. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable, filled with possibility rather than uncertainty. Martha was waiting on the porch when they returned, her knowing smile suggesting she'd anticipated this development all along. Tucker helped Olivia dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for showing me the ridge," she said. "Thank you for understanding," he replied, his voice pitched low for her alone. That night, Olivia wrote in the journal she'd started keeping since arriving at the Double G. Her pen moved swiftly across the page, recording the day's revelations and the shifting landscape of her heart. 3 months ago, she couldn't have imagined the life she now led, the open skies, the physical work, the sense of purpose she felt each day. Nor could she have predicted the growing attachment to a rancher with honest eyes and gentle hands. "I came to Wyoming with nothing," she wrote, "and find myself richer than I ever was in Boston." As spring yielded to summer, Olivia's role at the ranch expanded beyond the household. Her natural affinity with horses led Tucker to involve her more directly in the breeding program. She developed a system for tracking bloodlines and documented the traits of each animal, creating valuable records for future breeding decisions. The townsfolk gradually accepted her presence, though not without curiosity. On trips to Sweetwater Junction for supplies, she endured scrutiny from local women who wondered about her relationship with the eligible rancher. Tucker seemed oblivious to the gossip, treating her with the same respectful attention whether they were alone at the ranch or in the middle of the mercantile. Their courtship progressed with careful deliberation. Evening walks after supper became a regular occurrence, sometimes extending to the creek that bordered the property or the small grove of cottonwoods where wild roses bloomed in profusion. Tucker would pick one for her each time, waiting until they were returning to the house to present it with a formal bow that made her laugh. "In Boston," she told him during one such walk, "courtship follows strict protocols, formal calls, chaperoned outings, carefully worded notes." Tucker considered this as they paused by the creek. "Sounds stifling." "It was," Olivia admitted, "though I didn't realize it until I came here." "And how does Wyoming courtship compare?" he asked, a teasing light in his eyes. She pretended to consider the question seriously. "Well, there are fewer dance cards but significantly more manure." His laugh echoed across the water. "Not the most romantic comparison, but honest," she countered, "and I've come to value honesty above romance." Tucker picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the creek's surface. "Can't you have both?" Before she could answer, he turned to her, his expression suddenly earnest. "Olivia, I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, but what I feel for you is real, more real than anything I've known." Her breath caught at the naked emotion in his voice. "Tucker, you don't need to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know, whatever happens, however long you stay at the Double G, that won't change." The vulnerability in his declaration moved her deeply. This man, so confident in every aspect of ranch life, laid his heart before her without pretense or calculation. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, a question rather than a demand. Olivia answered by leaning into him, her hands resting lightly on his chest. She felt his heartbeat accelerate beneath her palm, matching the rapid pace of her own. When they finally separated, Tucker rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I should have done that at the ridge," he murmured. "This was better," she assured him, and kissed him again to prove it. Their return to the ranch was met with Martha's knowing smile. If she'd been concerned about propriety, she showed no sign of it, merely commenting that the evening air had brought color to Olivia's cheeks. Later, alone in her room, Olivia touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of Tucker's kiss. She'd been courted before, by Boston men with polished manners and calculated intentions. None had affected her the way Tucker did with his straightforward sincerity. July brought scorching heat, and the county's annual Independence Day celebration. The entire ranch traveled to Sweetwater Junction for the festivities, horse races, shooting competitions, a community picnic, and dancing under the stars. Tucker proudly introduced Olivia to neighbors and friends, his hand resting at the small of her back in a gesture both protective and possessive. "Miss Montgomery's the reason our accounts finally make sense," he told Mr. Henderson, the owner of the mercantile, "and she has a way with horses that's nothing short of miraculous." "Is that so?" Henderson said, eyeing Olivia with new interest. "The Garrett Ranch has always been well run, but it sounds like you've brought some fresh improvements." "Mr. Garrett exaggerates," Olivia demurred, though she was pleased by Tucker's praise. "I've merely organized systems that were already in place." "Nonsense," Tucker countered. "Diablo would still be trying to kill me if not for your singing." The conversation was interrupted by the announcement of the horse races. Tucker had entered his bay gelding Lightning, with Pedro riding. They excused themselves to watch from the makeshift grandstand where Martha had saved seats. "My brother seems quite taken with you," Martha commented as they watched the riders prepare. "Haven't seen him this happy in years." Olivia felt a blush warm her cheeks. "He's been very kind to me." "It's considerably more than kindness, dear," Martha said dryly. "And unless I'm mistaken, the feeling is mutual." Before Olivia could respond, the starting pistol fired. The crowd roared as the horses thundered past, dust billowing in their wake. Lightning surged to an early lead. Pedro bent low over his neck. "Come on, Lightning." Tucker shouted, on his feet with the rest of the spectators. The bay maintained his advantage around the far turn, but a spotted Appaloosa was gaining ground. As they entered the final stretch, the horses were neck and neck. "That's Caleb Turner's new stallion," Martha explained over the noise. "Been bragging about him for months." The finish was too close to call without the judge's determination. While they deliberated, Tucker excused himself to check on Pedro and Lightning. "He's going to ask you to marry him," Martha said matter-of-factly once her brother was out of earshot. "Probably soon." Olivia nearly choked on her lemonade. "I beg your pardon," Martha patted her hand. "I know my brother. He's been rebuilding the old Peterson cabin at the north end of the property. Says it's for a new ranch hand, but we don't need another hand." She fixed Olivia with a penetrating gaze. "He's building it for you." "But we've only known each other a few months," Olivia protested, though her heart raced at the possibility. "Time measures differently out here," Martha said simply. "Life's too uncertain to waste it once you've found what matters." Before Olivia could process this revelation, the judges announced Lightning as the winner by half a length. The crowd erupted again, and Tucker returned beaming with pride, the moment for private conversation lost. The evening brought cooler temperatures and music as locals assembled for the dance. Lanterns illuminated the town square where a platform had been constructed for the musicians, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a concertina. Tucker led Olivia onto the wooden dance floor for a lively reel. She'd never danced like this in Boston, where formal waltzes and quadrilles were the norm. Here, the steps were simpler but more energetic, requiring her to trust her partner's lead completely. "You're a quick learner," Tucker shouted over the music as he swung her around. "I have an excellent teacher," she returned, breathless from exertion and joy. As the evening progressed, they alternated between dancing and resting on benches set up around the perimeter. During one such break, Tucker brought her a cup of punch and settled beside her, his shoulder touching hers. "Having fun?" he asked. "More than I can express," she admitted. "I never imagined celebrations like this." Tucker watched the dancers for a moment before speaking again. "Olivia, would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to discuss." Her pulse quickened at the seriousness in his tone. Martha's prediction echoed in her mind as she nodded and placed her hand in his. They strolled away from the noise and lights, toward a small park at the edge of town. The air was fragrant with summer blooms, and stars blanketed the sky in a display impossible to see in Boston's gas-lit streets. Tucker led her to a bench beneath an old cottonwood tree. Rather than sitting beside her, he lowered himself to one knee, taking both her hands in his. "I had a speech prepared," he began, "with all the reasons why this makes sense. But looking at you now, the only thing that matters is how I feel." He drew a deep breath. "I love you, Olivia Montgomery. Will you marry me?" Though she'd been half expecting the proposal after Martha's warning, the reality of the moment, this good man kneeling before her, offering his heart with such unguarded honesty, overwhelmed her. "Tucker, we've known each other such a short time," she said, voicing her last rational concern. "I knew the day I found you at the depot," he replied. "Some things don't need time to be certain." Tears pricked her eyes as she recognized the truth in his words. She'd been raised to approach life with careful calculation, weighing options and consequences. But her journey to Wyoming had taught her that some decisions transcended logic. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I'll marry you." Joy transformed his features as he rose, pulling her into an embrace that lifted her off her feet. When he set her down, he reached into his pocket and produced a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slid it onto her finger. "Martha's been keeping it safe all these years." "It's beautiful," Olivia said, admiring how it caught the starlight. "And Martha knew you were planning this tonight," Tucker grinned. "Martha knows everything. It's her special talent." Returning to the dance, they were immediately surrounded by well-wishers, Martha having apparently shared the news in their absence. The celebration took on new significance as neighbors offered congratulations and advice to the engaged couple. The ride back to the ranch in the wagon was filled with plans and possibilities. Tucker described the cabin he was renovating: 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, a porch facing the mountains, while Olivia imagined making it a home. "It'll be ready by September," he promised. "Unless you'd prefer to wait longer." "September sounds perfect," she replied, leaning against his shoulder beneath the star-strewn sky. The following weeks passed in a flurry of activity. By day, Olivia continued her duties at the ranch while preparing for her new role as Tucker's wife. Evenings were often spent at the cabin site, where she and Tucker worked side by side, installing windows, hanging doors, and discussing furniture placement. Martha proved an enthusiastic ally, helping Olivia sew curtains and quilts for the cabin while sharing stories of Tucker's childhood, his determination to break his first colt at age 12, his stubborn insistence on finishing school despite his father's need for help at the ranch, his kindness to a family of settlers who lost everything in a fire. "He's a good man," Martha said as they stitched. "The best I know, but he can be stubborn as a mule when he thinks he's right." "I've noticed," Olivia said dryly, thinking of their recent disagreement about where to place the kitchen table. Martha chuckled. "You're good for him." "He needs someone who won't just agree with everything." "I doubt many would accuse me of that," Olivia admitted. "Good. A marriage needs honest disagreement sometimes." Martha set her sewing aside. "I want you to know how happy I am about this union. When Tucker found you at that depot, I thought he was bringing home another of his strays. Instead, he brought home the missing piece of our family." Touched, Olivia reached for the older woman's hand. "Thank you for welcoming me, Martha, for teaching me, for everything." Martha squeezed her fingers. "You're the daughter I never had, Olivia, the sister I always wanted for Tucker. It's I who should thank you." The wedding was set for the second Saturday in September, when the worst heat of summer had passed, but before the first snows threatened. Pastor Williams from the Sweetwater Junction church would perform the ceremony at the ranch, followed by a celebration with neighbors and friends. As the date approached, Olivia found herself increasingly reflective. She wrote to her former governess in Boston, the only person from her past with whom she'd maintained correspondence, sharing news of her engagement and the unexpected joy she'd found in Wyoming. "I came here with nothing," she wrote, "abandoned by people I barely knew. Now I find myself surrounded by love, purpose, and a future brighter than any I could have imagined in Boston. The journey that seemed a desperate last resort has become the greatest blessing of my life." 2 days before the wedding, Olivia was making final adjustments to her dress, a cream-colored silk Martha had ordered from Denver, when Tucker knocked on her bedroom door. "Olivia, there's someone here to see you." Puzzled, she covered the dress and opened the door. "Who is it?" Tucker's expression was unreadable. "Says his name is Robert Stillwell, your cousin." Shock rendered her momentarily speechless. "Robert here in the parlor with Martha." Tucker studied her face with concern. "You don't have to see him if you don't want to." Olivia took a steadying breath. "No, I should hear what he has to say." Tucker squeezed her hand. "I'll be right beside you." Robert Stillwell stood as they entered the parlor. He was a thin man with nervous eyes and a prematurely receding hairline. He twisted his hat in his hands as he offered an uncomfortable smile. "Cousin Olivia, you look well." "Mr. Stillwell," she acknowledged coolly. "This is unexpected." Martha, seated in her rocking chair with rigid posture that suggested barely contained fury, nodded at the sofa. "Sit, Olivia." "Mr. Stillwell was just explaining why they abandoned you at the depot." Robert's face reddened. "It wasn't like that. We intended to meet you, but circumstances." Tucker interrupted, remaining standing behind Olivia. "You invited her across the country, then left without a word." "We wrote," Robert protested. "Sent a letter explaining our decision to relocate. It must have crossed paths with you on your journey," he said to Olivia. "A letter I never received," she noted. "Why are you here now, cousin?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. "We've returned to Wyoming. The California venture didn't succeed as planned. When we heard in town that Olivia Montgomery was at the Double G and about to be married." He shrugged. "Eliza insisted we come make amends." "Amends," Olivia repeated flatly. "We still have our property outside town," Robert continued. "It's yours if you want it. Family should help family." The irony of this statement after what they'd done was breathtaking. Olivia studied the man who shared her blood but none of her principles. "Where is cousin Eliza now?" she asked. "At our hotel in town." She wasn't feeling well enough to make the trip out to the ranch. Tucker made a skeptical sound that Robert ignored. "The offer stands," he pressed. "The property is small but could provide you independence." Olivia felt Tucker stiffen behind her and reached back to touch his hand reassuringly. "That's very generous, cousin Robert, but unnecessary. I found my place here at the Double G." Relief and confusion warred in Robert's expression. "You're not angry?" "I was," Olivia admitted. "Terrified too, standing alone at that depot. But what seemed like abandonment led me exactly where I needed to be." She glanced up at Tucker. "Sometimes life's worst moments lead to our greatest blessings." Robert looked between Olivia and Tucker, finally registering the depth of connection between them. "I see," he said slowly. "Then our negligence turned out well for you." "It did," Olivia confirmed, "though that doesn't excuse what you did." Martha set her knitting aside decisively. "Mr. Stillwell, Olivia is getting married the day after tomorrow. Unless you and your wife plan to attend as guests, I suggest you've said what you came to say." Robert cleared his throat. "Yes, well, congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. If you should need anything, we won't," Tucker said firmly. After Robert's departure, Olivia stood at the window watching dust rise from his wagon as he drove away. She felt curiously empty, neither angry nor relieved by the confrontation. Tucker moved to stand beside her. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said, surprised to realize it was true. "They don't matter anymore. Their actions led me to you, but they have no place in our future." Tucker tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "You're remarkable, Olivia Montgomery." Soon to be Olivia Garrett, she reminded him with a smile. His answering grin was brilliant. The finest name in all of Wyoming. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, the first hints of autumn coloring the aspens golden against the evergreen backdrop. Martha had transformed the ranch yard into a celebration space, with tables borrowed from neighbors, wildflowers in mason jars, and strings of lanterns waiting for evening. In her room, Olivia prepared with Martha's help, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened pearl buttons and adjusted the delicate lace at her throat. "You look beautiful," Martha assured her, securing the final pin in Olivia's upswept hair. "Like you stepped out of a painting." Olivia studied her reflection, hardly recognizing the confident woman who gazed back. Gone was the frightened Boston girl who'd arrived at the depot 4 months ago. In her place stood a woman who had found her strength, her purpose, and her heart's home. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." Martha blinked rapidly, fighting emotion. "No tears now, we'll both ruin our faces before the ceremony." She squeezed Olivia's shoulders. "I'll tell them you're ready." Alone for the final moments of her single life, Olivia crossed to the window. Below, guests had assembled in the yard where an arbor of twisted willow branches marked the spot where she and Tucker would exchange vows. She could see him speaking with the pastor, tall and handsome in his best suit, his Stetson temporarily abandoned for the occasion. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up toward her window. The love in his expression, visible even at this distance, steadied her completely. Any lingering nerves dissolved, replaced by certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. A knock at the door announced it was time. Taking a deep breath, Olivia gathered her bouquet of late summer roses and opened the door to find Pedro waiting to escort her. "You look like an angel, Miss Olivia," the young ranch hand said with touching sincerity. "Thank you, Pedro. Shall we?" The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Olivia would later remember fragments, the warmth of Tucker's hands holding hers, the depth in his voice as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, the weight of the gold band as he slid it onto her finger, the joyful tears in Martha's eyes as she stood witness. Most of all, she would remember the moment Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, and Tucker kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart swell until she thought it might burst from happiness. The celebration lasted well into the night. Neighbors who had initially viewed the Boston transplant with suspicion now embraced her as one of their own, offering advice, recipes, and stories that welcomed her fully into the community. Even the Stillwells made a brief appearance, though they departed early after presenting the newlyweds with a silver serving platter. As the evening waned, Tucker led his bride away from the festivities toward their cabin, now completed and waiting for them to begin their life together. He'd insisted on carrying her over the threshold, an Eastern tradition he'd read about and found appealing. "Welcome home, Mrs. Garrett," he said as he set her gently on her feet in their new parlor. Olivia took in the space they'd created together, the sturdy furniture Tucker had built, the curtains she'd sewn, the bookshelves already filled with volumes from both their collections. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, warming the room against the September night's chill. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning in a slow circle to appreciate every detail. Tucker watched her with undisguised adoration. "You're perfect. I still can't believe you're my wife." "Believe it," she said, moving into his embrace. "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Later, as moonlight spilled through the bedroom window, Olivia lay in Tucker's arms, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Their lovemaking had been tender and unhurried, a beautiful beginning to the intimacy they would share throughout their lives together. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm grateful," she answered honestly. "For what specifically?" She propped herself up to look into his face, illuminated by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. "For being left at that depot. For you finding me there, for everything that followed." Tucker's smile was slow and sweet. "I told you that day you'd been waiting for me all along, and you for me," she added, settling back against his chest, "though neither of us knew it yet." "I knew," he insisted, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "The moment I saw you standing there, so brave despite everything, I knew you were the one I'd been looking for my whole life." The years that followed proved the truth of Tucker's intuition. The Double G prospered under their joint stewardship. with Olivia's organizational skills complementing Tucker's practical knowledge of ranching. Their horse breeding program gained regional recognition, with Diablo fully gentled by Olivia's patient handling, siring a line of exceptional stock that commanded premium prices. Martha remained at the main house, though she visited the cabin frequently, especially after the arrival of Thomas Garrett Jr. in the summer of 1880, followed by Elizabeth Martha Garrett 2 years later. Olivia occasionally received letters from Boston acquaintances, expressions of surprise or curiosity about her new life in the wild frontier. She answered them all politely but without regret, knowing she had found a happiness in Wyoming that would never have been possible in the drawing rooms of proper society. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Tucker surprised Olivia with a gift the deed to a small parcel of land adjoining the Double G where he proposed to build a schoolhouse. "The children around here need proper education," he explained as they stood on the site he'd selected. "And who better to provide it than a graduate of Miss Pembroke's Academy?" Olivia's eyes widened. "You want me to teach, if you'd like to," he said. "There's enough ranch hands now that you needn't handle the accounts every day, and Junior will start his schooling next year." The idea took root immediately. "We'd need books, desks, a blackboard." Tucker laughed at her enthusiasm. "Is that a yes?" "It's a wonderful idea," she confirmed, already envisioning the possibilities. The Sweetwater Junction School opened the following spring with 12 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Olivia approached teaching with the same dedication she'd brought to every aspect of ranch life, adapting Eastern educational principles to the practical needs of children growing up in the Wyoming Territory. When the railroad extended a new spur line to Sweetwater Junction in 1887, bringing increased commerce and population to the area, the school expanded to 2 rooms with Martha joining the staff to teach the younger children. Through all the changes and growth, the heart of Olivia and Tucker's life remained their home at the Double G. Each evening, no matter how busy the day had been, they would sit together on the porch of their cabin, no longer new but well-maintained and expanded to accommodate their growing family, and watch the sun set over the mountains. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Stillwells had met you that day?" Tucker asked one such evening as they observed their children playing with the new collie puppy in the yard. Olivia considered the question, watching Junior, the image of his father at 9, race his 7-year-old sister around a wagon wheel. "Sometimes, but not with regret," Tucker nodded, understanding as always. "Their loss was my gain." "Our gain," she corrected, resting her head against his shoulder. "Everything good in my life came from that moment of abandonment." 10 years after their wedding, Olivia received a letter from Boston that brought the past full circle. Her former governess had died, leaving Olivia a small inheritance and a collection of books they had enjoyed together during Olivia's education. "Enough to add that sunroom you've been wanting," Tucker observed when she shared the news. Olivia nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. "I've been thinking we should use it to establish a scholarship for a young person who wants to attend college but lacks the means." Tucker's expression softened with pride. "That's a fine idea. Someone gave me a chance when I had nothing," she explained. "This feels like the right way to honor that gift." The Olivia Montgomery Garrett Scholarship became an annual tradition, sending one promising student from Sweetwater Junction to college each year, first to Denver, later to universities as far away as Chicago and even Boston. As their 20th anniversary approached, Tucker and Olivia found themselves grandparents when Junior, now 19, married his childhood sweetheart and welcomed a daughter they named Grace. Elizabeth, following her mother's educational footprint, was studying to become a doctor in Denver, returning home during breaks with stories of medical advances and city life that fascinated her parents. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tucker asked as they sat by the fire one winter evening, gray now threaded through his once dark hair, laugh lines etched around Olivia's eyes. "When you stood at that depot, did you ever picture this life?" Olivia smiled, the memories of that desperate day now softened by the decades of joy that followed. "Never. I couldn't have dreamed anything this wonderful." Tucker took her hand, his touch as comforting and familiar as the rhythm of her own heartbeat. You know, I've never regretted a single day since finding you there. Not even when I insisted on painting the kitchen yellow, she teased. Not even then, he affirmed solemnly, though his eyes twinkled, though it was a terrible color choice. Olivia laughed, leaning into the warmth of his embrace. I love you, Tucker Garrett, more today than I did 20 years ago, which I wouldn't have thought possible then. And I love you, Olivia Garrett, more than words can say. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Inside, wrapped in the love they'd built together, Olivia offered a silent prayer of gratitude for unanswered letters, missed connections, and the moment of abandonment that had led her to this man, this home, this life. They had indeed been waiting for each other all along, though neither could have known it that day at the depot. What had seemed like an ending had been merely the beginning of a love story written across the Wyoming sky, as vast and enduring as the land itself.